We're going to continue our journey through the Fukanzazengi today. And you might recall if you were here last week, we were looking at the line um, about it is never, it's the first line from the second paragraph, it's never apart from this very place. What is the use of traveling around to practice? This place right here, this body right here, this body's the Buddha, this very place is the lotus land. There's nowhere else to go. We always practice right here, and we realize nirvana and enlightenment right here and now, all the time, no matter where we are. No matter where you go, there you are. So the next line that follows this, it is never apart from this very place. What is the use of traveling around to practice? Dogen then says, and yet, if there's a hair's breadth deviation, it is like the gap between heaven and earth. If the least like or dislike arises, the mind is lost in confusion. So the whole paragraph is, it is never apart from this very place. What is the use of traveling around to practice? And yet, if there is a hair's breadth deviation, it is like the gap between heaven and earth. If the least like or dislike arises, the mind is lost in confusion. So, yeah, I'm sure all of you, this is a pretty, I think, straightforward reality to grasp. And I'm sure this is an experience that you've had many, many times in your life. You have an idea of how things ought to be and how you'd like them to be, and they aren't that way. So there's a tiny difference between what you're expecting and what you want, what you think it should be, and how it is. You suffer. Like if you custom order a burger and you want crispy onions on it instead of red onions, and you get the red onions, it's like, still good, but not quite. Nishijima Roshi reframed the first noble truth, life is suffering, as the reality that, the way he put it is, our dreams will never come true. Life will never be exactly as you want it. And that is a huge source of suffering for us. So if there's a hair's breadth difference between the way you want it and how things are, it's a difference between heaven and earth. Nirvana, the word itself from Pali, means to blow out. And it's the sense of, sort of blowing out or letting go of the concept of reality and trying to force the reality of reality to be inside that concept. And part of that is the maybe expectation or striving to not have thoughts about reality. So I think a big conception about practice is that we're trying to get rid of our thinking, get rid of our delusions, get rid of this part of us that can dream up or think of how things ought to be. But the reality is we're never going to do that, because if you're a human being, you have a mind. So that's part of it, allowing that to be there. Uchiyama Roshi described it like this. He said, nirvana is the reality of a willow is green and a flower is red. Things exactly as they are. This point is something that shows up in numerous koans, and it's at the heart of all Buddhist teachings about suffering. There isn't another place to go other than here that's perfect, that we call nirvana. In fact, that's the reason we suffer is because we keep believing and striving that there's going to be another place. And if you come to Zen with that expectation, you might think, well, here's a really powerful technique to finally get me there. And what you start to realize is that trying to get wherever you think you ought to be is the problem. That's no way of life at all. So we're kind of looking at this contradiction that Dogen, puts forth as, we're already enlightened. Things are exactly, this is the lotus land. Things are exactly the way they are. There's no place to go. You as yourself right now are exactly as you ought to be. And yet things just don't feel right. Why is that? Why do we have to practice so hard? We need to practice. You need to live life in order to experience life. We need to practice letting go again and again and coming back so that we can live in the reality of a willow is green and a flower is red. So Dogen is beginning to build the case for the subject of Fukanzazengi, which is Zazen practice, in a very specific type of Zazen practice called Shikantaza, just sitting. Just sitting is just sitting, just practicing. In the same way that a violet blooms as a violet and a rose blooms as a rose, it's just about blooming, just being. Coming back again and again and again to just being. This is a really hard, it's a very straightforward practice, but it's a hard thing for us to accept. Just like it's hard to accept red onions when you want crispy onions. Maybe even a little bit harder than that, I'm not sure. You tell me. And it's a hard practice to do on your own, so that's why we have a community, and that's why we come back and do it together over and over again. We've got teachers who can help us get back on track, and when we start to think we've figured it out, we've had some sort of experience where finally we got to the other place to bring us back down to earth, and no, that's not it. Or when we're discouraged in our practice, to by their example, but also by encouragement and teaching to help us to keep coming back to our cushions. When you notice that you are having a rough moment and things are not as they ought to be or you think they ought to be, that's a really important gate to practice. It's an invitation, it's a trailhead to really be curious about what standard or requirement you're trying to force reality to conform to. And maybe sort of notice the hell you're creating for yourself in a moment like that. And this is going to happen again and again and again. And it's not that you're doing anything wrong in these moments, it's just it's another opportunity to notice just another little way you are creating your own suffering. Come back to just being. Let go and come back to just being. There's even a hair's breadth difference. It's the difference between heaven and hell.